Welcome to another edition of Around with Randall, your weekly podcast on making your nonprofit more effective for your community. And here is your host, the CEO and founder of Hallett Philanthropy, Randall Hallett.
It's an honor to have you join me, Randall, on this edition of Around with Randall. We want to jump into something a little bit more technical today when it comes to philanthropy. Covers from the donor management process to I'll connect it to finance, certainly to gift officers, to leadership, and to strategy. This is all about the figuring out of the give and take, the yin and yang of personalization versus automation of stewardship. Why am I talking about this? Because it's come up a couple different times in the last 60 to 90 days in various ways. It's kind of interesting how subjects seem to percolate when you pay a little bit of attention. One of which is the listserv that I'm on, or several, has come up about how do we steward people, recommendations, thoughts, questions from different nonprofits around the United States. Then there's a personal friend who has taken a new job, and she's kind of moving into the understanding of the organization, its kind of rhythm and process of philanthropy, larger organization. And what she's realized is that, and there's kind of subparts that have their own development operations or processes. It was a conversation around the closing of a campaign or a mini campaign in a certain part of the organization. And the question was, how often do we steward? And somebody said, we should steward all of our campaign donors 7 different times. And somebody asked, well, how are we going to do that? And what's it look like? And nobody can answer the question. I've also had a client recently begin to talk about a campaign and with a concern when it came to, are we prepared? Because maybe we haven't been stewarding our donors quite as well. All of this is to say that we are in this incredible push and pull, cost-benefit analysis of stewardship. So let me start at the top with a reminder. Why is stewardship so important? Well, we know, if you pay any attention in this industry, that the largest gifts that come in, and we live in a 95-5 world, 5% of our donors make up 95% of the dollars, that the largest gifts come in from that 5% are not first-time gifts. They are second, third, and fourth-time gifts most of the time, which makes stewardship quintessential. Because if we want to elevate those people, we need to find ways of building deeper, more meaningful relationships. As my dear friend Nathan Chappell calls it, the radical connection. In his book that he wrote, it was kind of become the namesake of our kind of where we're at in a period is the generosity crisis. But that leaves another 95%. What are we supposed to do with them? And how do we know which group, maybe that larger potential donor, tomorrow, or maybe even more importantly, in 2 or 3 years, if stewarded correctly, who are they? Which ones pop up into higher level conversations? So we want to try to steward everybody. But the problem is that individual or personalization of stewardship is time consuming because it's probably more hands-on versus the wider communication. And so back to my friend who's kind of leading this larger organization's philanthropy with lots of little parts, 7 touches to everybody, to some, or everybody get the same level of touches? How do we figure out who gets what? How do we do that? There's so much rich information out there about its importance, but probably not a very detailed look, at least enough conversation around a detailed look around what we need to do. And today, my goal is to give you some of those, as I try to every episode of Here on Around with Randall, tactical thoughts that you might be able to take. So let's start kind of working our way down, and the tactical is really at the end. We're going to cover some high ground, talk about what might be possible. At the end, I'm going to give you some suggestions and even some places that you can look to that might be able to automate a little bit more efficiently. No recommendations on who's better or worse, but maybe just some places that you can think about. So defining personalization, we just for 10 seconds so that we have a level setting. What we know is that when someone makes a gift, we want to tell them how their gift was used, why it was important, what value it had. Particularly, the more specific we can get, the better off we are, meaning their gift was restricted for this. The purpose was to do X. The outcome of X was this, and you were a part of that. We also could talk about kind of the other side. What happens when we either over personalize or don't personalize at all? Any kind of personalization. If you don't have any kind of personalization, what you end up with is kind of how I feel. My wife feels about some of our philanthropy. You get an email, you're like, you didn't even take the time to figure out what my interests were, or send me something that was more connected to what I want. Let me use a university as an example. And it's just meant as an example, nothing specific. But if you give to, as I tend to do, the law school, but your thank you, your personalization, your stewardship, your connection is from the university as a whole, and you really don't have a connection to the university as a whole, then that's really not helpful. And so finding ways of creating connection is really important to what they're interested in, what their priorities are. That could go all the way down to a fund that they are funding. What's happening with those funds? There's also over personalization where it can become so time intense. We're trying to do so much personalization that there aren't any clear priorities, and we end up making mistakes. We end up not clarifying what we're really trying to get to. Remember, the goal is to elevate the right people to higher levels of giving, while at the same time providing general information to those that make gifts so they understand what the organization is doing with those resources. There are limitations as we think about the idea of automation. Number one is that the goal of automation, the benefit is efficiency, speed, maybe creating some scalability. The risk is that it can become very generic if not done correctly. This is that university example. If you're just stewarding the university but not the law school, in my example, it's not that I don't like the university, but I have connection to certain places in it. Which brings us to this idea of striking a balance. What we're really talking about is sizable and scalable. So if you're an office of 3 people, you're going to have different answers to this scalability question and series of solutions than an office that's an academic medical center that has tremendous amounts of staff and resources. Not everybody's going to be able to do the same things. And sometimes you go to conferences, and I think about one of the sessions I sat in at HP's International Conference in San Diego in November. It was terrific, but it was such a large shop. There were a lot of, and I could see some eyes of people that I knew, like, I can't do any of these things. That's okay. The key is that you're building a plan, which we're going to talk about here in a moment, the tactical, to figure out what you can do. So the idea of personalization starts with you have to realize the goal not only is to provide information, but to elevate. We're in the money-making business philanthropically for our organizations to drive its mission. To do that, we have to have a firm understanding that we're trying to figure out who are the people that might make bigger gifts. So we're in the weeds is maybe more data management, it may be more prospect management, but I think it's a good thing for all of us to know. You should be screening people who give or pulling the results of those screenings and reviewing them. The reason why is when screening's done well, it gives you a direction, not an answer, a direction as to who might be able to give bigger dollars. When you compare, they gave 500, but when we look at it, they might be able to give us 25,000, or they give 25,000, or their philanthropy is much larger in general. Well, that tells me that at least I should begin a thought process of figuring out, are they connected to us? Why are they connected to us? How many gifts have they made? That might lead me to figure out I can elevate this person into a more personalized stewardship opportunity, taking them out of automation. The other thing is that if done really well and you're using kind of the leading AI, artificial intelligence, what Nathan Chappelle, my dear friend, and Donor Search is doing with their AI and DSAI can actually begin to figure these things out for you. And they start producing lists of people maybe that should have higher giving potential. It's one of those learning things that we've talked about with AI that as more data goes in, the model gets better. But you have to have a process to look at this. Again, you're a shop of three people, two people. Just look at the donor and how much maybe they could have given just from some outside information. That difference could be done in a spreadsheet and sorted very quickly. Can tell you, well, wait, these are people that we probably want to have more conversation with. The second thing is then once those things are distributed, is the question of what you do with them. And here is where we get into the very tactical. If you're building an individualized stewardship plan, so let's say you have 50 people. Again, do it sizably and scalably. If you're a shop of three, can you identify 25 to 50 that you want to build an individual cultivation plan for? I'm sorry. Well, actually, I'm not sorry. Stewardship is cultivation. I talk about that in the trainings and when I'm working with gift officers. But stewardship and an individual plan is about individual communication, connection, bringing the people in for tours, getting them to meet the CEO or someone that was very important in this process, having a couple cups of coffee with them, talking about why they made this gift, really honing in on the why and less about the dollar figure, telling them the story of what their gifts did. That's one-on-one or small group. That's the time intensive. So you're a small shop. Can you pick 25 or 50? Do a little research. Take all the gifts over the last 3 months, what they gave versus a screening. Pull that number out, put it in Excel, add, subtract them. Very quickly you can tell the differential of what they can give versus what they gave us is large. The larger the number, the more individualized opportunity. If we can figure out, are they connected? Remember, the connection piece is more important than the monetary piece, but we need to do some science to take it down to a number we can figure or work with. So I have a sheet that I use with clients that's actually a planning device of individual stewardship opportunities. You can use something like that to kind of create a plan, which, by the way, becomes a subset of your annual plan of your prospects, your prospect management, your planning, how many meetings you're going to have. A portion of that, because they may give a second gift the next year. So if they gave $500 this year, you're going to up the stewardship because they have a huge amount of potential. They can give $2,500 next year potentially. Then it's to $25,000. Then it may be an estate gift. But that's part of your planning process if you're a gift officer. If you're donor management, donor prospecting, data management, helping gift officers say, you need to be concentrating on these people because they can do more and they're already giving to us. We need to figure out why. So that is the individual stewardship process. And there's a million ways of doing that. Tours, meetings, coffees, meet the professionals, come in and see it, feel it, touch it. All kinds of ways that you can individualize a stewardship plan. The greater conversation, the tactical that comes from the automation is what you should do. Let's say you have 1,000 donors. You've elevated 25 to 50. That leaves you 950 to 975 people that you still want to steward. But if you're a staff of 2 or 3, it's like, I can't get to all these people. And it's just proportional. The more donors, probably the larger the organization. It's the same general problem, which gets us into the automating process. What's happened in the last 10 to 15 years in technology has allowed us to become much more engaged with our donors using automation. We might need a third party to help us in this process, which we're going to talk about here at the very end. What we know is that automation can help us with kind of the basics. Thank you letters and thank you emails. Things can be automated in CRMs very simply. I'm always amazed when I do a little bit of auditing, a little development, kind of review of what the organization's doing when I do different engagements, or that one in particular. And I'm seeing people do things by hand all the time. I'm like, what are you? People are our most valuable asset. How do I take certain tasks away from the people that can be automated so they can concentrate on things that can't be, that have more value? So thank you letters and emails. Certainly, you can set up reports simply in the CRM to do the data analysis, not complicated. This kind of automation will shorten the time frame and actually create more consistency, less human error. If we're able to figure out how do we take these people and begin to sort them? How do we do certain tasks in meaningful ways to get them to understand? A good example of automation. If you have 25 different gift accounts, meaning you're tracking where people's gifts are, the simple automation is these people get a different thank you letter than these people because they gave to this purpose versus this purpose. Or if you do a standardized thank you note or letter with some tax information, which can be required over $250, then they may get a second letter based upon what area they give. Or if they gave a certain dollar figure, we get a second report that says, hey, a month afterwards, we're going to make a phone call that's kind of from a volunteer, or it's not from a gift officer. We're not elevating them in an individual stewardship plan. But what we are doing is creating some automation in the process. The second thing then it becomes creating what I would call a calendar, the schedule of what you want to do. So donor anniversaries, I tend to think that we overlook this in just amazingly crazy ways of reminding people when they made the gift a year ago and not just throwing them into a big lump. That's that automation piece. Sending out something via email, sending something out via mail that's more automated on that anniversary. Or are there other things that you know about them, i.e., like birthdays or anniversaries or something that's a little more individualized? Maybe they've been a donor for a long time. How many years you've given? Thank you. Finding different patterns allow for different reporting that can change how you automate different messaging. You have events probably that you're doing. Finding ways to invite them. You're a donor. We can't thank you enough. We have this terrific event. We'd love for you to come. Or if they are an event donor, what are you doing with them to see if they have further connection than just attending the event because they came with someone who bought a table or bought a foursome? All of this is about giving data a rationale, a meaning. And then we can begin to figure out, okay, what are we going to do? Are we going to thank them over here? Are we going to thank them again? Are they going to be thanked with a phone call or a specific email? Maybe the CEO sends emails automated out to people over $5,000 who made a gift. That's a second or third touch. Automation. All of this leads us to recognition. How do we recognize people? The simple automation, which I tend to see very little done, there's two places in particular that actually do it pretty well, is about 3 months before the annual report goes out, they send out an email saying, hey, you might have made a gift this last year. Please check the list to see if you fit into the category. Now, you might think, well, that's kind of dumb. Man, people look for their names. Even higher level donors, $5,000 and $10,000 donors. Am I in the right place? Who else is giving in that category? Oh, I forgot to give. I should give to make sure I'm in the list. All this is to say is that recognition at a very base level is important. That then moves into higher things like putting their names on something in the building or on a program. How is this done? By the way, I'll give you another way to think about donor recognition. Social media, not my area of expertise, but when somebody puts out something, thanks for the donation to X, and it doesn't have to be $1 million. Maybe somebody made a $5,000 gift to your organization. It's incredibly meaningful, and you can put it out on social media with appropriate approvals that really elevates them because they are a $5,000 donor today, but man, you think you could get them to be a part of your organization at the $5 million mark or level 3 years down the road. This could be part of that planning process. Are there donations that you want to elevate that aren't quite where they're top, as we used our example, 25 to 50, with 950 left, because you're trying to automate, that certain levels, you're like, okay, we're going to do this over the next year. These 20 people can be automated. Thank you so much for your generosity with appropriate approvals. All of this is leading us to the conversation of how are we going to do this more effectively? Because at the end of the day, it's about maintaining these relationships. I think one of the automation pieces that we miss most often are volunteers. Now, they're human capital, human assets. Great job. But if you have people that you can come in and just do thank you calls or just do outreach calls, I've got a number of clients that I'm always just pleased and awed by. They've got one or two or three volunteers that all they do is come in for a couple hours a week and just make calls and say thank you. I'm a part of the organization. I work with the CEO, Chief Development Officer. We're just calling to say thank you for your amazing gift. That's an automated process with using some human capital. One of the neat things I did many years ago when I worked at St. Thomas Academy in Mendota Heights, Minnesota, Catholic military all-male college prep institution, loved working there, is we started a thank you night campaign every year, every semester, a week, each semester, multiple nights, the kids. And I've talked about this from a stewardship perspective in other podcasts. That originated from when my dad got a phone call from a Nebraska football player thanking him and my mother for being donors. He talked about it for years. Turned out to be starting quarterback. The point is that you can automate some things with personnel. What we tend to figure out is that we probably, when we look at this, need some help. So I'm going to give you some examples or places you can go look. I'm not going to singularly endorse any of them because I think that's unfair. I may not have all the details, and I certainly haven't worked specifically with them, but I've heard of these organizations through my clients and friends and colleagues who are having good luck. They're outsourced. There's a cost to them, but the cost I'm finding out is minimal in terms of what they can deliver. So let me give you some categories. Email marketing, i.e., what are we doing to get the email into people's inbox? You probably know some of these, but MailChimp, Constant Contact, HubSpot are all ones that are used. If you work in healthcare in particular, HIPAA is an important component of making this decision to making sure they're HIPAA compliant. If you want to chat, you can email me at podcast@hallphilanthropy.com. I'm glad to talk about this for hours, but the HIPAA compliance piece, you want to check. For everybody else, it's pretty clean. You can use any one of them and constantly be sending, when you have emails, updates segmented in different ways, different messaging, depending how much you want to play with it, but using a tool to send all that information so you don't have to do it yourself. Video messaging, I think, is critically important. I'm going to give you two to maybe just play with or Google to check. ThankView, so that's Thank VIEW, is one that I hear a lot. Another one is BombBomb. And what this is a way that you can record messaging and send them out through emails. I was touched by this one in particular in late November, early December with a gift that we made. And I got a very quick 45-second video from the head of philanthropy from the organization we made the gift from that I'm sure took her about a minute to do. But I watched it a couple times. I was like, that's outreach. That's stewardship. You got my attention. Give you another one. So that could be just reviewing, but there's a platform, so very simple to do. Another one is I get interestingly, a sung birthday message around the first of the month in my birthday month from another organization that we give to. Now, I'm not sure the voices are all that great, but I appreciate the effort. But they're sending out to anybody they have the birthday of in that particular month. It's not individualized. Again, another great way to use video. Mass segmentation to masses that's not individualized. Great way to appreciate people. Same is true of the holidays if you're a religious organization, or Easter, or other things that you might be connected to. What a great way of messaging people that you want them to know you care about them, because you genuinely do. It's just you don't have people and time to do it all. Another one is social media management, and this is not my expertise, but I have been watching the growth of individualized messaging as well as group messaging or telling the story through places like Hootsuite, that's HOOT Suite, SUITE, and Buffer. They offer a couple platforms. Again, I'm not endorsing any of them, but that can help you automate a lot of messaging in a really interesting way. The other place I would recommend is doing a deep dive into your CRM, whether it's Salesforce, Razor's Edge, Bloomerang, or Donor Perfect, whatever. Many of them have tools to help with at least some basic standardization, as well as a little bit of automation when it comes to processing. All of those things can help you figure out how to do more with what you're trying to accomplish. It's a balancing act. Just remember that when we think about the tactical takeaways, is that automation is not a replacement for stewardship and personal relationship building. It's a tool to do more of it with less resources, but it's not going to replace the top couple people. Again, depending on your size and your pipeline and needs, who are the people you need to build individual? Pull those people out first. Do that. Automation doesn't replace that. But what automation can do is get you better communication with the masses who you don't have as much resources or time to spend time really working with. The second thing is that when you create these automations, it actually is all about size and scale. You can't try to do everything. Pick the things that work best for you. If you happen to use a third party, like we talked about one of these particular recommendations, and we're really just mentionings like the video messaging of ThankView or BombBomb, you have to choose the things that you have value for, that you have money for, that actually you can use. There's nothing worse than working with a third party and then not doing anything with it. Remember, when we talk about automation, we talk about stewardship, we talk about individualized, personalized relationships. It doesn't make a difference. Donors don't want to feel like numbers. They don't want to be forgotten. They want to be appreciated appropriately for what you do. And so you have to find the right balance. It's an up and down, figure it out. But the more you do, the better off you are, as long as it's the most important word you take from this podcast, genuine. Automation can be genuine. Individualization can be, should be, and has to be genuine. And when you do it in the right way, sizable and scalable, you can do both and put some resources behind it to maximize its impact. The tactical call to action. Don't just overlook it. Talk about it, strategize about it, build a plan for it. Build a 3-year plan that every year you do a little bit more. Start small and build. What you'll find is donors stick around longer, they'll elevate their gifts, and they'll make a bigger difference in your organization. Don't forget to check out the blogs at hallettphilanthropy.com/blogs. 2-a-week RSS feed right to you if you'd like. And if you'd like to email me, that's podcast@hallettphilanthropy.com. As we move into 2025, I think there's some interesting things that may happen in the world, and that philanthropy may play a bigger role in the various sectors that we all work in: education, climate, healthcare, social service, all kinds of places. But philanthropy fills a gap. That gap between the commercialization, free enterprise, where there's not a profit, and government, which is inefficient. That middle ground is what we do. Don't forget my all-time favorite saying: some people make things happen, some people watch things happen. Then there are those who wondered what happened. We're people who make things happen. You're someone who makes these things happen for the persons, people, places that are wondering what happened. And there's no better way to spend a career than working to make the world a better place. I'll look forward to seeing you the next time, right back here on the next edition of Around with Randall. Don't forget, make it a great day.